It's not all that uncommon to hear the word meta while listening to a gaming live stream. Most of you would most likely understand what it is to metagame or play the meta, quote unquote. Back in the day, the word meta or metagame meant using information from outside the game to enhance your play inside the game. The term meta soon began to reflect using the collective experience of your gaming community to determine the way to play the most competitive level possible. An example of that would be playing the most overpowered hero in League, or let's say you're a noob at some FPS and you read up and try to find the most noob-friendly gun that allows you to play above your experience. When I used to play Call of Duty, this was obviously akimbo G18s. You just need to run around spraying with dual automatic Glocks, and it was crazy effective. So, you use information outside the game, like reading an article on a gaming news site, and it gave you a boost above all the other noobs around you, right? That's metagaming. So as gamers, we have this tendency to eke out every advantage we can get, right? Can we apply this to other areas of our life? Like in dating? Yes, most definitely. How do we go about doing all that, though? Metagaming requires a group of people or a community. You will need to decide who your audience is by maybe understanding if you have, quote unquote, a type, or maybe where you live has a certain culture that is specific to the area, or we're talking about maybe an age bracket, or we're talking about an interest group. Having an audience is crucial. Otherwise, the broad nature of saying anyone and everyone is good enough for you leaves you with little ability to game the system. And that's okay, but as you can imagine, it would lower your effectiveness. Just keep in mind, the more and more you expose yourself to women, you'll begin to understand many groups of people. Baby steps, though. Let's use the 4 examples I gave as ways to determine your audience and figure out some tactics for attracting them. I really hate to objectify anyone, nor do I want to be incredibly superficial. But unfortunately, humans are wired that way evolutionarily. By that, I mean, we are physically attracted to someone for a reason. Maybe you're attracted to a certain body shape, or you like people with tattoos, or you like people of a certain ethnicity, or even people that dress a certain way. If I'm to be honest with you all, I'm greatly attracted to Asian women. I've dated mainly Asian women since I was in high school. And to be clear, during the high school years, that was just one girl. And I'd say I was very lucky because she had a thing for Filipino guys. Well, so if she can do it, I can do it, right? Anyways, with great experience in having dated Asian women and being Asian myself, I began to have a good understanding of things Asian women like, what they like to do, what they like to eat, what they like to talk about, and what music they listen to, what their childhood would be like, what they study in school, and so much more. How do I harness this information and elevate my game because of it? Well, I found it was quite easy to get a date with an Asian woman without much effort. I'd say, let's get sushi and boba? Question mark? Likely the answer is going to be yes. So there you go, a date without working towards rapport, right? Technically yes, but merely suggesting something they would obviously love to do implies much more than the rapport you can build going in blind and trying to get to know someone. What it implies is that you get them and you understand where they're coming from. It implies similar taste. It implies a shared cultural background. We belong to an idea, the same idea. And I want to go on a quick tangent to better explain what it is to belong to something, as it will help support a lot of what I teach to people. There's a theory of how civilization started. For the majority of our species' existence, we've lived in a tribal setting. Those tribes usually numbered in the range of a couple dozen of people. It's thought the largest size band of people that could exist harmoniously would be around 150. This number was proposed by Robin Dunbar, who figured that it was a rough number of people that you could remember and socialize with. So how do we jump from groups of max 150 people in prehistoric times to civilizations with cities of thousands, which turned into millions in a couple millennia? It was all about believing in something together. It was about being part of an idea. What idea could bring thousands of prehistoric people into close quarters, shedding their tribal nature? It was spirituality. Everyone feared death and the unknowns related to it. The shamans and elders of tribes knew they could calm and control their tribe members by giving them answers to the afterlife. These teachings and stories took hold all over the world, and it was key to gathering people into towns and cities. It was because people belonged to the same idea of the afterlife, or what would turn into religion eventually. It was easy to innately trust each other because of believing in the same things would mean your outlook on life may be similar. Your backgrounds may be similar. Your other beliefs may be similar. Be it how you see the importance of family, or business, or politics. That innate trust allowed people to live nearer to each other, to conduct business with each other, to work with each other, and to create personal relationships with each other. How does this apply to us now, you might ask? Well, imagine if you had to buy something from a stranger. What fears run through your mind with that mere thought? Maybe this person is a fraudster and the product is shoddily made. Maybe if I give them my money, they'll run off with it. Maybe the product is counterfeit. Maybe the item was stolen. These are natural fears for us to have, and I'm sure people thousands of years ago thought the very same thing. But what if the stranger was part of the same belief as you were? Let's say you believe in religion that taught strict values and promoted honesty. Would you be more apt to spend money with that person considering they were brought up in the same way you were? You consider yourself a decent person, right? As the prevalence of religion wanes, it wouldn't be surprising if my listeners didn't all believe in religion or a God. So let me give you a different example. In America, college football is a huge deal. Belonging to a college and following the college's football team isn't really any different than being part of a prehistoric tribe. The team becomes your identity and has long-lasting effects for the rest of your life. It wouldn't be reasonable for you to know every single person that is a fan of your football team, though, right? So let's say you're at a college stadium watching a football game. You're surrounded by people you don't know, but you kind of know a little about because you share the love of your football team. If your team scores a touchdown, it wouldn't be surprising to hug and celebrate with your neighbors. It wouldn't be surprising for you to ask them to save your seat or watch some personal belonging of yours if you had to make a quick run to the concession stand. Belonging to something means inherent common interests and mutual understandings. When it comes to interacting with people, in this case dating, you can seemingly instantly create rapport by being similar to someone. I want to inject a caveat here that when I say cater to a group of people, that we do so in the sense that we appreciate what makes them who they are. I promise you, if you're not genuinely interested in a woman, that she will eventually see it. So if you superficially like something, I'll even go as far as to say you fetishize something, this won't help you. And I hope you take a look at yourself objectively and understand your motivation when you're deciding to approach or talk to a new woman. I digress though. I mentioned an age group being a potential audience, and it's kind of being part of an idea. When you belong to a certain generation, it comes with understandings of how society is viewed from that lens. It's not uncommon at the time of this podcast for, let's say millennials to see older people as too conservative, too set in their ways, inflexible in their idea of social progress, and so much more. Saying that, you could understand that dating outside your age group comes with built-in issues that are outside of the surface problem of looking differently aged. These obstacles can be insurmountable because your ability to relate to them is rather difficult. But let's say you do come across someone who is in a different generation than yourself. It doesn't mean a relationship with them is impossible. Heck, we have examples all around us with older men dating younger women, for instance. I hope you understand that there are underlying causes such as wealth and power that goes into that particular circumstance typically. But anyways, if you match with a younger person, how do you attract them? It's important to understand your audience so you can metagame this interaction. I've dated many college-age women in my life, and actually that audience makes up a good percentage of the women I've dated and still do. Me never having been a social butterfly, I found my exact counterpart in women who are in college. In the sense they are incredibly social. They love being around many, many people. Of course, this is a generalization, but it does prove itself in many of the relationships I've been in. So how do we metagame for a woman who's around 18 to 24 years old? What is something that is really seemingly cool, that has a lot of energy and has thousands of people participating in? Music festivals and concerts. These women love these places. The music, planning for it, and perhaps the drug use at them. Having a good understanding of the music being played at these festivals and maybe listening to these bands and singers outside those settings, or maybe even going regularly to these places, puts you in the same realm as a group of attractive and outgoing women, these college-age women. What else happens at a place that music is being played? Dancing. Many of these women love to dance, and some of them like shuffle, which is like kind of like a footwork type of dance. So if you happen to like to dance, or if you're like me and have breakdance in the past, well, there you go. You can further connect with them. I know this is silly, but I know if I smoke marijuana, I could easily attract so many more of these women, especially at festivals. Everyone is doing some type of drug. Women would ask me if I smoked, and of course I would answer honestly, saying I've never smoked anything in my life. That answer for sure works against me. Whenever you're on Tinder, take note of how many women say they're quote unquote 420 friendly. I mean, yeah. Anyways, I'm sure I come off kind of square or boring to those types of women, and maybe they think I'll be judging them because they smoke or do drugs. That's a worry I hear expressed a lot when getting to know someone who smokes marijuana heavily. But let's say you do smoke. Great. Well, you probably understand a lot about that culture around it. And you easily understand the point of view of a person who looks for the high and what they get from it and how they're better for it. You have common ground, and conversation can start and proceed so much easier. To continue with the idea of age being an audience group, can you do this with people in your own age bracket? Yeah, for sure. Most definitely. If you grew up experiencing the same events, or if growing up in your day meant a unique experience of some sort, you already have natural rapport if you can capitalize on it. Realizing and being aware of what should be inherently obvious is an actual skill we need to improve on, so let's keep that in mind. When you're speaking to a woman, we might get caught up in trying to find out what that person's interests are and what her personality is like. I've had men tell me they actually ask questions like, what's your favorite color? Unless you're using that as an opening or a pickup line, these mundane interview questions convey a lack of ability to socialize. We should instead assume things or predict things or rephrase questions into statements or turn questions into more elaborate questions. So if I'm dating a woman that is my age, what can I assume, and what are those things? Number one, she would have had a long-term or a few serious relationships by now. Number two, she won't be receptive to nonsense, meaning I would probably speak about different things and in a different way. Number three, with her dating experience, she will be perhaps more defensive as she is single now, and the relationships she had been have obviously ended for some reason. Number four, I can't emotionally tax these women, so I would need to attract without what people might consider playing games with them, quote unquote. Number five, they may have children, so you need to convey a respect for their time and understand that you will never be their highest priority. Number six, they have established careers. Younger women are attracted to potential and ambition, but a woman that is self-sufficient won't necessarily find that all that impressive. Number seven, there is a much higher appreciation of trust and respect with them. Number eight, though everyone loves sex, casual sex isn't exactly their primary drive, and they don't see sex as a value they need to easily give away just to get your attention. These are just some of the things I'm conscious about when thinking about dating a person my age. To tailor yourself to your audience, to be meta, you need to be aware of how you act, speak, and hold yourself while being aware of what women of your audience need. You can be that, it's in all of us, but we don't know how to convey it. So how do we convey it in this instance, considering all the points I just outlined? How do I tailor myself to a woman who is my age? Let's talk about appearances first. How do I dress to meet a woman who is 35 years old? Assuming the date is a normal restaurant or cafe, I'll wear a button-up shirt, most likely, with my sleeves rolled up, no tie, top button undone. It will be tucked into a pair of dress pants and, of course, a belt. Leather shoes of some sort as well. That kind of makes sense, right? I'm just trying to act and dress my age here and look the part. I'll style my hair, be clean shaven. But let's say I'm going out to meet a college-age woman around 22 years old, let's say. It's not that she wouldn't respect if I dress up the same way. It's more about making sure she's comfortable with being around me. You can definitely overdress for the situation, but I don't even mean overdressing for the setting. In this instance, I mean overdressing for her, your date. Overshadowing her or making her look underdressed. If we both go somewhere dressed too casually, we can at least commiserate over that together. If you're my age, you can probably recall your college years and understand that, people in college don't have massive amounts of disposable income ready to throw around on nice clothes, or you just didn't bring the nice clothes down with you when you moved into your dorm. I've run across this situation many, many times where women show up to a date and she's dressed really casually. And then I came to understand that that's just what they do now. They really want to be comfortable. They don't want to spend their money on clothes. They don't want to look too old. They're all about experiences and having fun and being minimally invested in anything. You should mirror that to a certain degree. Okay, let's move on. How do I speak and what do I speak about with these two hypothetical women? A woman my age is likely bearing the same responsibilities I am. We have many bills, especially a mortgage to pay for. We have parents getting older. Perhaps we have families from previous relationships. We're trying to maintain and advance our careers as well. There's a lot going on and the stakes are really, really high. If anything goes wrong in our lives, many people would be affected. So, let's say if we lost our job and can't pay for a house, what happens? Me or her and her kids will get thrown out on the street. I bring this up because a common thing I notice is younger women asking me, why do you care about the news? She may continue with saying, they don't even know what's happening in the world at this very moment. Of course, that's paraphrased, but it's definitely the mindset of younger people. They live more in this moment. So I'm on a date with a woman my age. Maybe parts of our conversation will trend to talking about what is going on right now, current events. It's because these events can shape our future and impact us and our families greatly. Right now, as I make this podcast, the coronavirus, COVID-19, is ravaging the world and people are out of work. But right here in Florida, there are thousands of college people partying it up on the beaches for spring break. People my age with all the responsibilities I mentioned can't help but be concerned about the reaction the world has on the virus. We can't help but be aware of how it can be affecting us financially. So if my conversation with a 35-year-old woman is topical and leaning towards serious, what does my conversation look like with a college-age woman? I mentioned experiences a couple minutes ago, and it's a huge talking point with a 22-year-old. She can be learning about amazing things in class, and she has a career just around the corner once she graduates. But those aren't really ever going to be part of your conversation. What will grab her attention, though, is travel, or just the mere thought of it. They see their affluent friends traveling the world, and it's so important for them to do the same. They want to experience another culture, but more show it off to their friends and family. A picture of them in their tiniest bikini on the whitest sand beach on the sunniest day is a dream that would immortalize them in the peak of their sexuality. Now, I'm not much of a beachgoer, but I do travel, and it's one of the more intriguing aspects of me that younger people look to. I can go on and on about traveling to Asia and the food and the people and the stories of the intricacies of the culture. I get that everyone likes to travel. But the 35-year-old woman likely has traveled, and the 22-year-old can only fantasize about it. The fact that I may have a great interest in travel would be attractive in the sense that we could do it together perhaps, and she can realize that dream. Experiences are everything to younger people. It's perhaps their generation, but if you look into yourself and relate to them in that way, it can go a long way into developing a quick rapport. On to the next point. Relationship experience. As we get older, it's just more likely we have had numerous relationships. It's just a numbers game. It's just time. What comes with these relationships is baggage, though. Some people cannot let go of it. The emotional trauma that is inflicted in these past relationships will affect how I proceed. An older woman has seen it all and knows exactly what she wants. I can't pretend to be someone else. I can't make promises I can't keep. I can't build her up to manipulate her. I take great care in how I speak of what I speak about. The older someone gets, the more set in stone her ideas and values are as well. Taking strong positions against them are not challenging to her. They are instead affronts to her person. Since she is single, we can assume some of these past boyfriends or even a husband, they weren't amazing people. Because she's not with them anymore. As much as we shouldn't pay the price for these men's choices, we ultimately will. Being respectful goes a long way, especially when trying to escalate sexually. I found it best to foster a strong emotional connection, which I found will get me further than appealing to their sexuality. In contrast, a younger woman doesn't really have the time as an adult to have had much of a serious relationship, never mind multiple of them. Their idea of what makes a relationship isn't very solid. It wouldn't be surprising for them not to have a good answer to the question of, what do you want from a relationship? Or, what makes a good relationship? At the same time, they aren't typically emotionally damaged by anyone at this point, and they maintain a carefree approach to what a relationship is composed of, since they don't really care to define it. It goes along with the fourth point I made previously to say that I can do or say most anything I want and not fear much punishment for it. Women say they don't like games or they don't like to be messed with in relationships, but when they don't have a strong idea of what a good relationship looks like, they try to find working examples around them. Unfortunately, these examples aren't based in much reality, or they just aren't very functional. Be it couples in movies or TV shows or ones from their social groups, it's why confidence is such a big deal for them. They need a guide in life, and if you come off as being experienced in it, it's attractive. It's why the push-pull tactic men use in pickup artistry and seduction works so well on younger women. Moving on, we'll combine 5 and 6 of the points I mentioned earlier, as they revolve around the same premise. Women who have children or established careers. You won't be able to do the same things with them as you would with a younger woman. You likely wouldn't be going to a club to get wasted, or a music festival to get high, or drunk at a bar necessarily. And yes, they obviously want to be treated as a grown-up, but it's them wanting to be responsible to the things they're devoted to and invested in. No parent should be coming home drunk to their kids. No employee should be coming to work with a hangover the next day. Another component to consider is the time they have to even go out with you and create a relationship with you. You're going to need to be flexible and patient. Not only do they have those responsibilities, but they just can't let anyone into their lives. That could ruin everything they worked so hard for. They'll be cautious with you, and rightly so. This means your approach can't be strong and you can't burn bright. This must be a slower process of attraction, as it shows you're willing to invest in her and you respect her. A young woman may have these same responsibilities, but most likely not. And what I mean is, careers and children. You'll find they are, quote unquote, down for anything. I don't know how many times I've heard that statement. Maybe 100 times. Something you do have to consider with a younger woman is that they, might not have those careers and families to manage, but they see their friends as almost as important. I think what I contend with the most is they'll appear to be flighty or evasive because they're always wanting to have fun in the easiest way possible, which would be from their already existing social group, their friends. Just something to keep in mind. For point 7 and 8, the respect for women and the sexual possibilities of the relationship. They are closely related. The hookup culture that you find in college-age people doesn't necessarily translate to women, past that stage. Like I said, everyone loves sex. Sex is great. But when someone begins to find themselves, and I mean when they understand who they are and what their value is, casual sex isn't a prime motivator when it comes to dating. You get to the point by, of course, being attractive to a woman, but for a woman my age, you'll have to be much more than that. You will have a lot of obstacles to work through, most certainly. This isn't a bad thing, as I think the act of sex is emotionally charged and can really affect people if you don't see them again after. I say that, because there are women in college where they find a lot of value in their physical traits. Also, the younger they are, the more curious about sex they might be, especially if they grew up in a conservative household. Let's touch base on the interest-based audience that I mentioned in the last example of the groups that you can metagame for. You've heard this all your life, that you should find common interests with someone, And that's a precursor to a good relationship, or at least the start of one. Fair point. It really is. But I don't think it's really metagaming when you're trying to find that interest in someone, because it implies you don't really know anything about them. Instead, we need to identify what our audience is or what group they belong to. So you come into the interaction not needing to ask what their interests are. You come into it being part of that group already and assuming many things about her. As that assumption, though risky, it comes with great reward if you're right in your assumptions. So how does this work exactly? Well, we're all nerdy guys, right? We all love cutting edge technology, space, futuristic stuff. Maybe you're like me and idolize Elon Musk and the contributions he's making to spaceflight and humanity in general. Okay, so coincidentally, I dated a lot of women who are trying to be in or already working in the aerospace industry. It might be the fact I don't live too far from Cape Canaveral. So if you see a woman's dating profile and it mentions they work in the industry, or if their profile says they go to some aeronautical school like Embry-Riddle University in Daytona Beach, you don't go into the conversation with them saying, "Oh, you like space and stuff." You assume they're already into that stuff. Your goal is to make yourself part of that crowd, that you think like them, that you are them. Just as a reminder, be actually authentically interested in these people and what is important to them. We're not acting. If you aren't passionate about what you talk about, this won't work. I really want to stress the importance of being genuine because, like I said before, women will see right through your shit. I promise you. They won't call you out to your face, but they just might disappear and ghost you instead. Okay, back to space talk. So, how do you talk like you're assuming you know them? Well, I talk about related topics that are intriguing to me. A woman once said this to me in a text. All of the companies let their employees watch the launch. Now, since I follow Elon Musk's doings a little bit, I knew the launches she was talking about were the Starlink satellites launching that day at the Cape. So I replied with, "Oh, you must have watched the SpaceX rockets carrying the Starlink satellites." She replied, "How did you know that?" Okay, I didn't want to address that question, so I didn't answer it. I don't like an interview style conversation with back and forth questions, because at that point we've been doing that back and forth for a few minutes already. I hate that. So instead, I go into a short little story about how much I admire Elon. I said, "It's incredible what he's done with his life." She interjected asking, "Who?" I replied saying, "Elon Musk. His path in life and the risks he's taken and the success he's had, it baffles me how many people are trying to break him down for all the good he tries to do, and that he's a once-in-a-generation innovative mind." She said, "Yeah, I don't know why everyone hates on him." I reply with, "Right? I don't think people appreciate him enough. If more people were conscious of the fact it's so much harder to innovate and discover new ways to do things nowadays. Society worships at the feet of the greats like Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton as grandfathers of science, physics, and the like. But no offense to them and other scientists from 100 years ago, they were picking low-hanging fruit. Everything by now is basically figured out, except where the universe has come from, and that likely won't be answered. So what Elon is doing now is taking ideas and perfecting them with a slant of reusability, practicality, and bringing that technology to the everyday person, like you and me. I hope that in 100 years from now, the world looks back to Elon like how we look to the greats like Albert Einstein. I got her number right after that story, and we set a date by text that very night, and we went on the date 2 days later. In another space-related situation, I matched with a girl who went to the local university here. Her profile said I should ask her about her majors, and this is to make sure people read her profile. I obliged because I was actually pretty curious. She told me she was an astronomy major, and I took note of it, but didn't expand on it because I think I would prefer the story to be said with my own voice, and not in text. I find my delivery is much more effective speaking than typing it out, And you'll likely find that to be the same for you as well once you polish up your speaking ability. I saw in her photos she was in band back in her high school days. And she put in her sexuality section herself as bisexual. I've dated enough women to know that those things are related. And I did a typical psychology breakdown / therapy routine where I explain and guess her choices up to joining the band and how her experience in band played a role in her sexuality, the change from straight to bisexual in high school. This stuff is like for another podcast, this psychology stuff. So I did get her number after I basically explained her own life to her. And yeah, I could probably close with a date at that point, but I personally wanted to talk about space with someone who was really interested in it. This is the part of the whole being genuinely interested. So I called her and I made sure she was in bed, which meant I had her full attention. I hate it when a girl's like walking around multitasking while I'm talking to them. It makes me really ineffective, so I prefer not to. So anyways, I brought up her astronomy major now. I opened with asking her how strongly she believes in astrology. And she replied she's dabbled in it for years. I, of course, was not surprised and asked her if she was taking astronomy to expand on her interests of astrology. She didn't really know how to answer that. And so I just went onto a topic that I wanted to talk about anyways. I opened with, when people think about the awesomeness of space, people love to look at the vastness of it all, of course, the universe. Or they are mesmerized about the incomprehensible power of a single point in space, which are black holes, of course, that can capture the fastest moving things in existence, light and photons. Not me, though. We've consumed the idea of infinity in all kinds of ways. Movies, TVs, and books. In those sources of media, they've talked about being lost in that vastness of space or being trapped by a black hole for like 100 years now. I, instead, am in awe of the balance of a neutron star. It's just a more realistic thing for me to appreciate. We can actually look at it, study it, take a picture of it. The balancing act is how it was a star that died and collapsed, but it didn't become a black hole. The core is just pure neutrons, hence the name, without charge, so that means all the electrons and also the protons just melted into this immensely dense neutron core. But it's not just that. The star spins so fast that if you track any point on the surface of that star, that it would show you it was spinning at 1/4 the speed of light. It doesn't end there, though. The neutrons are so tightly packed that it can't be compressed any smaller without collapsing in onto itself. But it can't collapse because the outward pressure of the neutrons are keeping the star from becoming a black hole. The density is such that if you took a handful of the neutrons, the mass in your hands would weigh billions of tons. And to top this all off, the magnetic field of this thing, it's up to a quadrillion times stronger than the Earth's magnetic field. That strength would literally rearrange your atom structure, completely dissolving you if you got close enough to it. Okay, that was like my little spiel. If you're curious as to what happened after, she said, "Can you come over right now?" What I'm getting at here is that we can relate to these women on a level that is unique. And in this case, maybe it's intellectual. It is attractive. We really need to capitalize on what we can do well. We need to weaponize our intellect, our ability to speak well, and our interests. Maybe we never saw ourselves as conventionally attractive, but we are in special ways. When you master yourself and you can confidently deliver, you can do things you never thought you could do. I am not physically exceptional looking. I'm maybe at best average, but I'm really comfortable with myself. Not in a lazy way, but instead, this version of me right now is the best me I can be. It doesn't mean I can't improve, but I'm really happy with this version so far. Do you guys want another example? Okay. I'll try to keep this short and digestible. I had this phase in my life recently where I wanted to just date girls from Ivy League schools. I was really curious about their potential and intelligence and if they are different from women, from other women I've dated. So I had to travel a bit as they just aren't readily available in Central Florida. So I found myself in San Francisco a lot. I was on a date with a Korean woman who graduated from Yale Law School. I've dated maybe 7 other Ivy League women recently before meeting this woman in particular. And I was able to kind of understand at this point that most of the women would fall into like 2 categories. Tech business stuff or law, which is likely because we were so close to Silicon Valley. Anyways, so I needed to narrow it down so I could start coming across as a peer in some sorts, right? I asked her if she found herself in San Jose much, or where does she live in relation to where we're at. She said no. She says she doesn't live that far from the restaurant, which we were at for the date. So that meant she was living near downtown San Francisco, with San Jose being closer to Silicon Valley. So I went with a law angle for this one. Not but a month ago, before that date, I was sitting on a flight in first class, going from Los Angeles to Orlando. Next to me sat a trial lawyer, and we talked for like 5 hours straight about everything it is to be a lawyer. Me not being a lawyer, I was able to thankfully recall some of this experience. And I started the conversation with her about the ethics and morals of being a defense lawyer for criminals, and not a public defender, but literally a lawyer looking for work revolving around defending killers and rapists and the like. She was really into it, and she asked me, like every woman asked me, what college did you go to and if I practiced law? Of course, if you listen to my other podcasts, I did not go to college. I barely passed high school. But, it was fun, and I occasionally talk to her even now. And not too surprisingly, she's trying to get into tech. It's just that area, I guess. People can't help it. Well, that was that. Well, to continue tradition, let's end this podcast with a Reddit dating advice question. And I ran across this post today. And it was actually related to something I will eventually talk about, but from a man's perspective. Here's the situation. This woman's post says, how can I get over being ghosted after sex? Long story short, I was ghosted after sex and I lost my virginity to him. I told myself it would be fine since I don't love him. I don't feel attached. But I was wrong. He hasn't texted me since that day. It feels horrible. Any advice would be appreciated. Okay, so that's the post, and this is awful because I myself have had women give up their virginity for me, and you have to be really sensitive to the gravity of that situation from their point of view. And I'm going to talk about that in an entirely separate podcast one day. But for her, how does a person cope with this? Well, it's about the mindset and motivation we have when we do things. How is it aligned to benefit us always? Was her motivation to please him, to try to keep him in some way, or to make something more of their relationship? I don't think she would be conscious of those things really, not at her age or her inexperience. But if she changed her motivation to be, more selfish, then her whole perspective will change for what that experience was and all the ones that are to come. So how does one be more selfish in this case? It's about telling yourself you're using him, that the sex that you guys had has always intrigued you. And it's just a means to an end to have sex with him. The mystery is gone. You might have found the act enjoyable though. Sex feels good. You get something out of it. It's just not about him and making him happy. Maybe it was kind of awkward for you because it was your first time, but now let's make the motivation about getting better at sex so you can be more in the moment and focus on making it special for yourself the next time around. It's the same premise I have when it comes to dates. I tell people I never had bad dates. I've been on hundreds of dates and none of them stand out as scarring or traumatic. The reason for this is because I have a mission going into that date. It's like playing a game for me. Like maybe you want to get better at a new hero in League of Legends. And the only way to do it is to play that hero over and over again. Yeah, maybe from the outside looking in, you played horrible and you lost in that first game. But for yourself, the goal wasn't to win necessarily. It was to learn the spells and when and where to use them. So next time you'll be better. Same goes for every one of my dates. Maybe I want to practice speaking to a different type of woman, a different audience, or try a new story out to see if it hits really well. Or for this woman from the Reddit post, she should look at her interactions with men as always ways to improve her abilities to resist them, to attract them, and to keep them. We aren't born with social skills. We learn them, and to master them takes time. Don't think I don't understand the emotion that goes into sex. I'm well aware of it, and I sympathize with her greatly. But our mindset is everything. It protects us and helps us get to the best version of ourselves. That's all for today. Thank you so much for listening again, and you'll be hearing from me again soon.